Disorders of trauma and stress. Specialist Latrell Robinson, a 25-year-old single African-American man, was an activated National Guardsman, serving in the Iraq War. He had been a full-time college student and competitive athlete raised by a single mother in public housing. Initially trained in transportation, he was called to active duty and retrained as a military policeman to serve with his unit in Baghdad. He described enjoying the high intensity of his deployment and became recognized by others as an informal leader because of his aggressiveness and self-confidence. He had numerous combat exposures while performing convoy escort and security details, and he came under small arms fire on several occasions, witnessing dead and injured civilians and Iraqi soldiers and on occasion feeling powerless when forced to detour or take evasive action. He began to develop increasing mistrust of the Iraq environment as the situation on the street seemed to deteriorate. He often felt that he and his fellow soldiers were placed in harm's way needlessly. On a routine convoy mission, in 2003, serving as driver for the lead Humvee, his vehicle was struck by an improvised explosive device showering him with shrapnel in his neck, arm, and leg. Another member of his vehicle was even more seriously injured. He was evacuated to the Combat Support Hospital, CSH, where he was treated and returned to duty. After several days, despite requiring crutches and suffering chronic pain from retained shrapnel in his neck, he began to become angry at his command and doctors for keeping him in Iraq, while he was unable to perform his duties effectively. He began to develop insomnia, hypervigilance, and a startle response. His initial dreams of the event became more intense and frequent, and he suffered intrusive thoughts and flashbacks of the attack. He began to withdraw from his friends and suffered anhedonia, feeling detached from others, and he feared his future would be cut short. He was referred to a psychiatrist at the CSH. After 2 months of unsuccessful rehabilitation for his battle injuries and worsening depressive and anxiety symptoms, he was evacuated to a military medical center in the United States. He was screened for psychiatric symptoms and was referred for outpatient evaluation and management. He met criteria for acute PTSD and was offered medication management, supportive therapy, and group therapy. He was ambivalent about taking passes or convalescent leave to his home because of fears of being different, irritated, or aggressive around his family or girlfriend. After 3 months at the Military Service Center, he was deactivated from service and referred to his local VA hospital to receive follow-up care. During the horror of combat, soldiers often become highly anxious and depressed, confused and disoriented, even physically ill. Moreover, for many, like Latrell, these and related reactions to extraordinary stress or trauma continue well beyond the combat experience itself. Of course, it is not just combat soldiers who are affected by stress. Nor does stress have to rise to the level of combat trauma to have a profound effect on psychological and physical functioning. Stress comes in all sizes and shapes, and we are all greatly affected by it. We feel some degree of stress whenever we are faced with demands or opportunities that require us to change in some manner. The state of stress has 2 components: a stressor, the event that creates the demands, and a stress response, the person's reactions to the demands. The stressors of life may include annoying everyday hassles, such as rush hour traffic, turning point events, such as college graduation or marriage. Long-term problems, such as poverty or poor health, or traumatic events, such as major accidents, assaults, tornadoes, or military combat. Our response to such stressors is influenced by the way we judge both the events and our capacity to react to them in an effective way. People who sense that they have the ability and the resources to cope are more likely to take stressors in stride and to respond well. When we view a stressor as threatening, a natural reaction is arousal and a sense of fear. Fear is actually a package of responses that are physical, emotional, and cognitive. Physically, we perspire, our breathing quickens, our muscles tense, and our heart beats faster. Turning pale, developing goosebumps, and feeling nauseated are other physical reactions. Emotional responses to extreme threats include horror, dread, and even panic. While in the cognitive realm, fear can disturb our ability to concentrate and remember and may distort our view of the world. We may, for example, remember things incorrectly or exaggerate the harm that actually threatens us. Stress reactions, and the sense of fear they produce, are often at play in psychological disorders. People who experience a large number of stressful events are particularly vulnerable to the onset of the anxiety disorders. Similarly, increases in stress have been linked to the onset of depression, schizophrenia, sexual dysfunctioning, and other psychological problems. Extraordinary stress and trauma play an even more central role in certain psychological disorders. In these disorders, the reactions to stress become severe and debilitating, linger for a long period of time, and may make it impossible for the individual to live a normal life. Under the heading, Trauma and Stressor-Related Disorders, DSM-5 lists several disorders in which trauma and extraordinary stress trigger a wide range of stress symptoms, including heightened arousal, anxiety and mood problems, memory and orientation difficulties, and behavioral disturbances. Two of these disorders, acute stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder, are discussed in this chapter. In addition, DSM-5 lists the dissociative disorders, a group of disorders also triggered by traumatic events, in which the primary symptoms are severe memory and orientation problems. These disorders, dissociative amnesia, dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder, and depersonalization derealization disorder, are also examined in this chapter. To fully understand these various stress-related disorders, it is important to appreciate the precise nature of stress and how the brain and body typically react to stress. Thus, let's first discuss stress and arousal, then move on to discussions of acute and post-traumatic stress disorders and the dissociative disorders. Stress and arousal, the fight-or-flight response. The features of arousal and fear are set in motion by the brain area called the hypothalamus. When our brain interprets a situation as dangerous, neurotransmitters in the hypothalamus are released, triggering the firing of neurons throughout the brain and the release of chemicals throughout the body. Actually, the hypothalamus activates two important systems: the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system. The autonomic nervous system, ANS, is the extensive network of nerve fibers that connect the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, to all the other organs of the body. These fibers help control the involuntary activities of the organs: breathing, heartbeat, blood pressure, perspiration, and the like. The endocrine system is the network of glands located throughout the body. Glands release hormones into the bloodstream and onto the various body organs. The ANS and the endocrine system often overlap in their responsibilities. There are two pathways, or routes, by which these systems produce arousal and fear reactions: the sympathetic nervous system pathway and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal pathway. When we face a dangerous situation, the hypothalamus first excites the sympathetic nervous system, a group of ANS fibers that work to quicken our heartbeat and produce the other changes that we experience as fear or anxiety. These nerves may stimulate the organs of the body directly. For example, they may directly stimulate the heart and increase heart rate. The nerves may also influence the organs indirectly, by stimulating the adrenal glands, glands located on top of the kidneys, particularly an area of these glands called the adrenal medulla. When the adrenal medulla is stimulated, the chemicals epinephrine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, noradrenaline, are released. You have already seen that these chemicals are important neurotransmitters when they operate in the brain. When released from the adrenal medulla, however, they act as hormones and travel through the bloodstream to various organs and muscles, further producing arousal and fear. When the perceived danger passes, a second group of autonomic nervous system fibers, called the parasympathetic nervous system, helps return our heartbeat and other body processes to normal. Together, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems help control our arousal and fear reactions. The second pathway by which arousal and fear reactions are produced is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) pathway. When we are faced by stressors, the hypothalamus also signals the pituitary gland, which lies nearby, to secrete the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. Sometimes called the body's major stress hormone. ACTH, in turn, stimulates the outer layer of the adrenal glands, an area called the adrenal cortex, triggering the release of a group of stress hormones called corticosteroids, including the hormone cortisol. These corticosteroids travel to various body organs, where they further produce arousal and fear reactions. The reactions on display in these two pathways are collectively referred to as the fight-or-flight response, precisely because they arouse our body and prepare us for a response to danger. Each person has a particular pattern of autonomic and endocrine functioning and so a particular way of experiencing arousal and fear. Some people are almost always relaxed, while others typically feel tension, even when no threat is apparent. A person's general level of arousal and anxiety is sometimes called trait anxiety because it seems to be a general trait that each of us brings to the events in our lives. Psychologists have found that differences in trait anxiety appear soon after birth. People also differ in their sense of which situations are threatening. Walking through a forest may be fearsome for one person but relaxing for another. Flying in an airplane may arouse terror in some people and boredom in others. Such variations are called differences in situation or state.